simplified in layman terms. So what I created is, it is kind of a structured story format where you can put your business story in itself, and it keeps on evolving over time. So now look back to the definition that strategizer gave. They said that you keep on reinventing, pivoting, and all the stuff which actually happens over a period of time. And why do you do it? You do it because you want to grow your business. You either want to scale it up, or you see that there are certain problems right now you're facing. You want to make a new turn to it. That's why it is an evolving over time, right? And what more thing that business model canvas helps to do is helps you in identifying the loose ends of your business. Once you know where are the loose ends, you can actually work on it and cope with it, right? But before, I mean, this is, if the definition of business model canvas is that simple, we cannot ignore to understand that how actually the different blocks of it work. I know when you probably registered, you have just googled about business model canvas and you have seen a very good chart, but what is the meaning of it? I'll just play a 2-minute video, listen to it, and nothing more brilliant than this small video will explain you exactly the basics of a business model canvas.
An organization's business model can be described with 9 basic building blocks: your customer segments, your value proposition for each segment, the channels to reach customers, customer relationships you establish, the revenue streams you generate, the key resources and key activities you require to create value, the key partners, and the cost structure of the business model. But it's not sufficient to just enumerate the 9 building blocks. What you really want to do is to map them out on a pre-structured canvas. This is what we call the business model canvas, the tool that helps you map, discuss, design, and invent new business models. Let's briefly go through the 9 building blocks, starting with the customer segments. These are all the people or organizations for which you're creating value. This includes simple users and paying customers. For each segment, you have a specific value proposition. These are the bundles of products and services that create value for your customers. The channels describe through which touch points you're interacting with customers and delivering value. Customer relationships outline the type of relationship you're establishing with your customers. The revenue streams make clear how and through which pricing mechanisms your business model is capturing value. Then you need to describe the infrastructure to create, deliver, and capture value. The key resources show which assets are indispensable in your business model. The key activities show which things you really need to be able to perform well. The key partners show who can help you leverage your business model, since you won't own all key resources yourself, nor will you perform all key activities. Then once you understand your business model's infrastructure, you'll also have an idea of its cost structure. So with the business model canvas, you can map out your entire business model in one image. This works for startup entrepreneurs just as well as for the most senior executives.
So actually what we saw in the video is essentially making of this, and it explained you the each block of the business model canvas, what it is actually, which weaves into a story. And what is the story about? The story is all about your business, how you run it, who you cater to, and what value you provide to the different user or customer segments. That is what business model canvas is all about. But remember one thing, as the definition says, it's an evolving one. So today, the one that you have been feeling into your canvas is not going to be the same 5 years down the line, or even say 1.5 years down the line. Things will keep on changing because, right now, since we are in this COVID-19 situation, obviously the models that used to work before cannot work right now. You have to pivot, right? You have to make things, you have to make changes in it. People who had been doing things offline, they are planning to go online. They're managing their business model canvas accordingly. They're making the tweaks into that. So that's all about business model canvas. But Doesn't matter whatever you make, okay, whatever product you are coming up with, whatever service you are coming up with, if you want to make it really successful, there are three important things that you should definitely package into your product or service. What are those? These are the three things that's very important, guys. And remember one thing, doesn't matter whatever you make, if the one you can see over here in yellow, this value, if it is not there, then it makes no sense to make any product or service. Okay, when there is a convergence between these three, which is essentially starts with the user desirability, which is what your user wants, what they desire to have. Number two is business viability, whether the business is able to provide that, whether the business logic makes sense, whether there is an economics that makes sense. And finally, the technology feasibility, which is currently whatever technical things are available, can it provide the solution that the user desires? These three, when these three merge together, you have the sweet spot, which is the yellow part over here you can see, which we called value. And until and unless you have a defined value applied to your product or service, don't think of making money out of it. Don't think of your business going a long way, right? So it doesn't matter whatever you make, remember these three things has to be there. Now you may say that there are a lot of startups that are running today which still lack a lot on business viability. Now you know why they still run? Because user desirability is high. So what it is about, when you see there are a lot of coupon codes been given for different services that the startups are providing. So say Big Basket, right now I don't think they give many coupon codes, but yeah, there are for a long time they kept on doing it, and different other startups did too. Now there was a business viability question, and that's where they are trying to figure out right now how they can manage it. But remember one thing, user desirability is so important that if you have made that right, then it's very difficult for anybody else to come and disrupt you. So if you want to safeguard yourself from disruption, remember one thing, that you have to be very high on user desirability. Obviously, business viability and technical feasibility has to be there in the business. When I am talking about all this and going back again to the business model canvas, does this actually help me in looking at these three aspects? Does this package the three aspects that are very important to for my product or service? What's striking is yes. The answer is a big yes. And if you see here, the first from the left side, the first four blocks, all talking about the customer segment, the value you provide to them, the channel through which you provide them, and the relationship you maintain with your customer, they all go into user desirability, right? Whatever you want to do, what are the key things that you need to do to run your business? That goes into key activities, right? You have certain resources within you, within your business, that you can use. That can be your team, that can be certain technologies that you have, that can be certain patents that you hold, all these things, and the key partnerships that you maintain. All this goes into your technical feasibility, whether it is feasible to deliver this value today to your user. The third part is the business viability, which talks about what is the cost of doing all this. I'm talking about so many stuff, right? And there is something that I'm getting out from my user, which is my revenue stream. Whether these two make a positive mark when I deduct the cost structure for my revenue stream, do I have a positive sense? If yes, there is an economic viability. So when you look at the business model canvas, it actually nicely packages all the three components that is very important to run a business, right? So today, what we are going to focus on is the user desirability part. That too, we are going to take only two very critical aspects of the business model canvas, which essentially makes the complete story of your business. So once you are done with this two, your business model canvas will be a very easy job to make, not a very difficult one. Okay. So let's start with the user segment. And while I go, I'll pause at few places and I'll take questions from you, because guys, it is, I guess, for a lot of you, this may be the first time you are going through all this. So feel free to ask questions. That's why I asked you to get a pen and paper, write down your questions, just hold on. Wherever possible, we'll have a pause and we'll take the questions. Fine. So first part is, why do we need to define my user segment so importantly? Why is it important to define a user segment? I'll show you something. You know what? This is my slide. One slide I made in 2014 when I was presenting my business plan. There was one business plan I was working at that time on, and I was presenting in a business competition, business model competition. And once I presented this was one of the slides which said that who is my customer, and I presented this. What I meant to say when I did this is everyone is my customer, you know. And literally, you won't believe, literally there were 3 judges and they laughed. Now I felt that probably they are happy to see that finally somebody is coming out with a brilliant solution that can have a huge market. We always feel that, right? As entrepreneurs, we feel that if I can show the market is huge, my investor will be very happy, right? That's what we believe, and that's what I try to do. Obviously I didn't win anything in that competition, but they actually didn't tell me that why did they laugh. But I realized that there is some mistake, there is some problem that I made. So what I realized that it's not only me, there is a lot of people who used to believe that bigger the market, more is the money. If you have a very big market, if you have a lot of people, you say that everybody is going to be my customer, the kind of service I'm coming up with, there is more money. But unfortunately the truth is, if there is more value, there is more money. If you want to earn money, guys, remember one thing, that you have to give value. If you are not packaging value, don't expect money. That's the simple equation for any business. Now let's draw an analogy and try to understand how this thing works. Okay, for the time being, let's assume that you considered everyone is your customer. So everyone includes what? Everyone, if I go back to this picture, see, there is a sadhu kind of a guys here, there's an old guy over here, there are young people. So everybody is there, right? So when you are talking about everybody, any demography, any kind of people, then let me consider that these people are essentially seeds. Okay, seeds that you put into the ground to expect plants to grow. Fine. Now these seeds, for right now, they look, all of them look same, but for the timing, let's assume they are different. All 6 are different seeds, seeds of this plant, seeds of that plant, and different seeds. You got all these seeds, and as a farmer you want to take care of them. And my analogy over here is you being a farmer to you being somebody who is running a business. Fine. Now see, different seeds require different things. Some require more sunlight, some require less. Some require more water, some require less. Some require more fertilizer, some require less. And there can be more other nutrients that some require and some doesn't. But what you are doing, you are providing the same stuff to everyone, right? All the seeds are getting the same thing. So for some, you are providing more than necessary. For some, you are providing very less than necessary. What happens? You will have stunted growth, or the roots are rotten, right? So what is that equivalent to? You unhappy customers. You are actually not providing to anybody anything. For people who doesn't need much, you are wasting your money because you are providing a lot of things. You can provide only one kind of a service, right? You cannot go ahead and provide a lot of things, right? So when you are providing average to people, then this is ought to happen. That's the reason why, guys, this is very, very important that you identify your user segment very, very well. You identify whom you are serving. Everyone can never be your customer, and this is one big problem that most of the entrepreneurs make. And for the timing, let's realize that this is something that we definitely are not going to be doing. Okay. Now this is something that not only me, there is a very good detailed paper on Harvard Business Review called the Why Most Product Launches Fail. There are other reasons also, but this is one of the reasons. They talk about Segway. Segway is, you can see this this one, the policeman is traveling on. This product failed terribly, and one of the biggest reasons they failed terribly was because of they couldn't identify who are they actually catering to. You will deviate a lot if you do that. Big companies make this for problem, so it's possible that you may also end up making the problem. This is the right time you write it down that I will not be making this issue. Okay, so once we know that why we actually need to define the user segments, let's try to realize that who are going to be my users. Fine. So who are the people who can be my user? There are three things over here that I have written. People or different segments whom you want to reach and serve. Okay. They may not directly generate revenues. That's why you see over here, though the business model canvas originally say customer segment, I changed it to user segment. Customer, when you say customer, automatically the money thing comes, right? You have a money factor that somebody is paying you. When you say user, it's somebody using it. Take the example of Google. We all are actually the consumers of what Google has to serve, right? But do we pay Google for the search that we do? We don't, right? Still, if you see, Google had consistently kept one thing very clear. They don't want to clutter us. They made things very simple. At one point of time, this is an image of Yahoo in 2002. This is how their search bar used to look like. Why did Yahoo lose the love that people used to have when they used to go out and search? We never thought that this is a problem. There were so many things. We were probably happy that, okay, fine, when I go and search, I get this, I get that. But Google realized that this is not something that people are looking for. When they're coming onto the internet and they're trying to type something, they have already something in mind that they want to type. I don't want to complicate those things. So Google essentially didn't take money from us to do this. But if we weren't there, would AdSense, AdWord work? Imagine a time when people just leave going and Googling. We don't have the word Googling at all. Then what happens? There's no sense in having an AdWord or an AdSense, right? They cannot earn the revenue. They cannot earn at all, right? So that's how we, who are the ones who are consuming the data, who are looking at things and we are learning new things, we are not the ones who are paying, but still Google cares for us. They keep on making tweaks. That's one part of it. The other part is there can be users where there can be different types of, so your user segment not necessarily has to be one big same kind of segment. You can have further small groups. Okay. When you open an Ola app, I guess right now because of COVID, you don't have the Ola Share. I don't know whether they have it, but I guess they don't have it. But otherwise, Ola Share was there very much, right? And see, Ola Share was for category of people who didn't want to shell out a lot of money to get the privilege of reaching their office in a comfort of a car. But at the same time, there are people who want to use a car to feel majestic. That's why they have the Ola Prime, and you can see that that's how they put their ads. The art of arriving. You get out from a car which is quite good looking, right? That gives you a social status. So there are two different status looking people that essentially Ola has catered to in the same app, right? So you realize how important it is for you to realize who your user is, how you categorize, how you provide product or service, rather how you design product or service for this category of people, right? Another category of people is where you can club different similar activities and create one single service, right? Now, I haven't named here who is this company, but I guess most of you know about it. But let's look at it. Medicines. These guys deliver medicines also. These guys deliver food also, grocery, pet supplies, everything they deliver. But when you say medicine, who comes in your mind delivering medicine? Mostly Practo, Nedmeds, 1mg, MedLife, they all do this, right? They deliver medicines to you. They're focused on delivering that one stuff. There are companies who are delivering food to you. Zomato, Swiggy does. There were Foodpanda, there was Uber Eats, right? But they were only concentrating on food. But then this company, they decided that I will consider the job that the customer wants to get done, which is delivery. And I will just be the delivery king. I will deliver everything. That's what they decided. But now the question is, there is a trade-off. Is that Nedmeds not doing enough, that they are only delivering medicine? And Danzo is a brilliant one who could do this. This is Danzo, by the way. So there is a trade-off. So what Nedmeds is focusing on is a niche. They're focusing on that I will be focusing only on medicine. I will be cutting down all the bottlenecks that people have when they order medicine and get it delivered. Whereas Danzo have thought that, okay, fine, no problem. I'll take all this in a single, under a single roof, and I will manage. But it's not an easy thing to manage. That's the reason why probably Dunzo may be having dedicated resources for each of these segments, where people are just looking at one segment, concentrating on that, nurturing the customers, and that's how they manage stuff. So there is always a trade-off that you need to do, right? At this point, we need to realize that what are the different segments, user segment types we have. And this is where I will start requiring your help to understand. Now, for the timing, let's have a look at this picture. And I need somebody from you to tell me who will be coming to this kind of a shop. Who will be buying this? Who is the customer? How big is the market for this?
Marwadi and Gujarati.
Okay.
Male 25.
Yes.
Male 25 plus.
Okay. You went to age. Okay.
Hey, hi,
Yes,
it's
Ravi.
Ravitesh here. So the user segment is the radius of maybe about 1 to 2 kilometers to that
Okay.
shop is the user segment to that
Brilliant.
people. And maybe the bachelors or the family people will be the user segment for him, because these all are FMCG products. These all are essential to everyone. So, but his major drawback is the distance or the reach, because every 2 kilometers or 1 kilometer, there will be another grocery store like this where
Mhm.
people will go.
Okay. Any other stuff? Anybody wants to add anything anywhere?
Hi, I'm Kaustav. Hello.
Hello.
I'm Kaustav.
Yes,
This
Kaustav.
man is selling essential goods, mostly FMCG products. So
Mhm.
from every household, there will be a customer for
Okay.
this
Okay.
businessman.
So quite a big market, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess but they might there might be distributors also. I mean, a small kirana shop, people can go to these people and buy the product from there. So that might also be a type of segment, customer segment.
Okay.
Adding to it, there are many, we have to create various segments. So there will be kids one section, there will be married male female one section. It will be then SCCP other section, and even when with respect to the distributor dealers, there will be another target group segment.
Okay. Anybody else?
Santam, I think we talked about much on customer segmentation. So the product which is there in the store was a general requirement of everybody, but this store represent a certain segment where we can talk about let's say middle class people or upper middle class people or a higher class people. So it's a requirement of everybody, but the store seems to be a middle class kind of requirement, and they are focusing on that particular segment in that particular area, basically.
Absolutely spot on. So yeah, I just go back to it and I'll share. So yes, absolutely. So most of the time I see, guys, can you just keep your microphone on mute? There's an echo. Okay. So this is something that we call a mass market. As many of you said that yes, a lot of people can come, but again, since this is segmentation, as rightly said by many of you, that there has to be a distinction. So definitely not everybody. Remember, whenever you are thinking that everybody, remember the seed story. Always remember that. No, cannot be everybody. Can I say whoever needs grocery? Probably yes, to some extent, yes. Probably whoever needs grocery. But if I say so, then who comes here? If people who are coming there needs grocery, does not these people also need grocery? Yes, they definitely do. What more happens here? What is the biggest difference between these two? Do you realize that in a mega mart, this kind of a mart, shopping mart, all the essentials are packed at the fag end, at the last last part of the mart is where they have all the necessities which people go and buy, right? The rice, the char, the dal and everything, right? What happens in the in between, they package all the fancy items. And see, here you can see this stuff. Do people really plan to buy and come? Most of the time, no, probably. They come and they do certain kind of buying, which we call the impulsive buying, right? They see, they buy. But when you go here, Can you even see the biscuit over there? What is this biscuit? Like, nobody can even realize. So what happens is somebody standing at this part, which is far away from the last part, is just looking at a list he's holding, and he's asking that, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this from this brand? All these things are happening, right? Here, people are more conscious about what brand they want. They're pretty much sure that this is what I want. I don't want anything other than this. Here, people are ready to experiment. Here, people are, most of the time, 75% of people who actually buy in a mega mart kind of a stuff, they make online transactions, either a card swipe or some kind of scanning of barcode and all. Here, you mostly see cash transactions happening. Here, the people who come, they ask this guy, the guy who is standing, do you have this? Or if you have an alternative, what is it? They rely on this guy. Here, these guys, these ladies, they can rely on anybody who is wearing a "May I help you" tag, comes and says that this is a new offer that is there with this product. Do you want to buy this? This is a nice one. Sometimes we fail for that, right? We say, okay, fine, we'll try it, right? So essentially, if I try to draw my user segment over here, as many of you rightly said, it's very, very important. Just like you sharpen a pencil, you sharpen your user segment, and you keep on adding the number of ands. You have seen here, I have kept the ands at red, right? The more and you put, the more focused you become, that who is your user segment. So people who need grocery, and not like impulsive buying, and are price sensitive, and are comfortable mostly in cash payment, and rely mostly on known people, they are the ones who may come. There can be other ands also. There can be new ands you can think of. This is something that I have put just to make you realize how important it is to sharpen your user segment, right? But mass market is definitely one of the kind of markets that we are talking about under the user segments. There is another kind of market, which is the niche market. And this is where you see, this is another kind of a grocery store, but very focused. This has an angle where people who are more health conscious, who are into Ayurvedic stuff and all, and who definitely they have to rely on the brand Patanjali, they will only come here. Even if somebody who is health conscious and Ayurvedic kind of a guy, but does not believe in Patanjali or Baba Ramdev, they won't come here, right? So this is a very niche market they are catering to. They are not catering to a mass market, right? So that's the second type of user segment that we have. Third type of user segment is this. Now, guys, one disclaimer here. As I said that for a long time I was working with Mahindra, so a lot of examples you will see related to Mahindra. Okay, so segmented market is where you see the same type of product, but there is a segment. Now, I just spoke about Ola. Ola also did a segmentation there, but here this is a little different segmentation. Why? Because a guy who goes to office every day is somebody who says that, okay, fine, I will take a Ola share. But one day, if he decides to take his family out, he will not look for an Ola share. Then at that time, probably he will look to take a Ola Prime or a Mini or something, right? Here, there is a big difference. Somebody who is buying a truck or an Alturas, let's say, an Alturas, Mahindra Alturas, Mahindra is not going to pitch for a truck to him, right? At least the city crowd, they are definitely not going to truck. But these are all automobiles. A truck also is an automobile. A bus also is an automobile. Similarly, this kind of cars, the Alturas, the XUV 500, 300, whatever you talk about, they are also cars, right? They're all automobiles. But this caters to the topmost ones are the ones that cater to the personal need. The bottom ones cater to the commercial need. So there's a distinct difference between these two, and that's what segmented market is all about. There is another kind of a market which is called the diversified market, right? What is diversified market? You don't have, the last one that you saw was a segmented one. So automobiles was there, but within automobile, there was a segment. Here, there is no relation between all this. Say Mahindra is in life space, which is essentially real estate business. Mahindra is in aerospace also. Mahindra is in agriculture also. Now you may say that tractor is a kind of an automobile only. Yes, true. But how many of you know that Mahindra also is one of the leading grape exporters in India? So Mahindra is diversified into multiple stuff, right? That's what your diversified segments are. Diversified market is all about. And lastly, that is something that you almost every time see right now going around, is a multi-sided platform like the Zomatos, the Olas, the Ubers. Platform, most of the time, it is multi-sided. It has to be. Because when it's a platform, you get somebody, you give somebody, right? It's something like the metro station. That's why it's a platform, right? People come to the platform, there's a metro train coming, you get onto it, it goes. So the platform allows you to come and get into something else. Similarly, here, this kind of businesses, what they have is they have multi-sites. Zomatos actually earn from both sides. The restaurants also pay them because of the ads that they want to run on the platform. And people like us, you, me, we order food from the Zomatos and Swiggies. So we also pay them. And there is a delivery charge also. So all this are the multi-sided platforms. So Zomato is one example. Ola, Uber is another example. And there are others also who are into it. Platform strategy is one of the biggest strategy to talk about. Now, I said a lot about user segments, right? And this is, I think, one question that is there in your mind right now. I have listened to a lot. So many things are there. I am overwhelmed. I am about to start. What do I do? Like, how do I define my user segment? Guys, before I tell you how do you do it, let me show you a picture and let me ask you, anybody recognize this young champ? You can unmute yourself and let me know. Who is this young champ? Anybody? I'll give a clue in the next slide. Anybody can guess who is this? No one? Okay. So I give you, anybody unmuted? Okay. This is Bhavish Agarwal. Okay. The guy, this is a 2010 picture of Bhavish Agarwal when he started. Now, where is Ola? Ola right now is across India in different cities and towns. But when it started in 2010, this is what Bhavish Agarwal was holding in his one placard, where he just was telling that I will be providing a cab to every Mumbaiker. That's it. I hope this gives you an idea where to start. You don't think of so many segments right at this point. So why did I tell you all that? I told you all that because, as I said before, your business model canvas is an ever evolving one. You will keep on have to look into it. But when you start with experiments, you start with prototypes. You start with something that you can learn from, right? And you don't go at a global level. What you do is, though this is what essentially Ola did later on, but initially they only start providing cars to people in Mumbai. That's it, nothing else. Once they saw there is a success, they got some investors because they could show that there is a traction, there are customers coming on board. So a lot of times I hear people saying that, how do I get an investor? To get investor, the first thing that you need to do is to prove yourself. Show that you are worth it, your business is worth. And this is what they did. Later on, when they had money and all, then they went ahead and made this, right? So I am borrowing a very famous quote from Albert Einstein over here, where this is a quote that he gave for problem solving. And he said that if I have 60 minutes to solve a problem, I will make the problem statement, define it for 55 minutes, understand it well, and 5 minutes I'll just solve it, right? I am just redefining it. I'm borrowing it. I am redefining it and putting this. If I have 60 minutes to come up with a new business idea, I'll spend 55 minutes to defining the user segment for whom I want to create the service, and just 5 minutes to come up with a product or idea service. That's it. So it's very important, guys, that you understand your user segment, define them really well, because if you have done that, you have done the magic. That's done. You have solved the problem already. Just then you need to use your brain and come up with a solution, which most of us are very good at. We don't have a problem in coming up with solutions. Where we make a problem is we come up with wrong solutions, wrong problems, solutions to wrong problems. We don't realize that whether that's a real problem because we have not figured out the user segment only. That's important, right?
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to know who is the user segment for Google, because they cater to every audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So user segment, initially when you see user segment, when they probably started off with doing, they were going for people initially at, let's say, 2002, a little around that time, who had the access to internet. If you never had that access to internet, you could not do it. Now, once they have done that they have categorized the people who have access to internet and who try to understand, understand and learn new things, they only come to my platform. Once that happened, they figure out that this is something that is working, and obviously internet became ubiquitous. Then they actually opened it up for everybody. That's how the mass market comes into being, right? Now, user segment again is quite different from your customer segment, and that's what I was talking about when I said Google, right? So the people who are coming on user to create content or search for content is a segment, and people who are paying you Google for that are the people who are advertising. So that's another segment. So essentially, these people came much later than the ones who created the content for Google. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Santan?
Yes.
Yeah, so Ravi here.
Yeah,
I have one question. Right now, whatever the example we are talking about, they are mostly, very new business which we are talking about. I mean, the innovative business model we are talking about. But what about, suppose I want to start on Amazon. I want to become a seller on Amazon, and there are multiple such people there, right? And
True.
more or less, I know that who are my segment. So
Okay.
I mean, how and what is your take on that? So that how I should be going on that part?
Okay, actually, Ravi, in this slide, I actually kept two or three hidden slides, which I thought that maybe because of time I may not be able to cover. But because you asked these questions, definitely I'll come to that. I will unhide those and I will show you. That's a secret. I think a few of the people who are there in today's session, they went through another session of mine and they know it. But I'll bring it on. Don't worry. Just please hold on to that thought. And before I finish, I will show you what to do for that. Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay, so this is one advice that I have for entrepreneurs. I think by this time you have already understood this, that this is how you should be starting. And I'm not going into details of it. You can take a screenshot of this, how you can create your user segmentation template, how it has to be, what are the things you need to look at. These are things that you mostly will get also on internet, but these are curated stuff. So if you want, you can just take a screenshot of this or take down. Fine. I can come back again later on and show this to you, or rather I'll do one thing. I can share this PDF to you guys, so you can later on refer to it as well. So moving on, because of time, I'll take a few questions on user segment if you have. I'll stop the sharing for the timing and we are just good on time. Any questions till now on this?
Hi, Santan. This is Parmesh Mahadev.
Yes, Parmesh.
I have a question related to value propositions. You have categorized as a user desirability. So how did you categorize that? And I was thinking that value proposition comes under a business proposition. I mean that. So
True.
How do you categorize and how it is different? Could you please throw a light on that?
Awesome question. Thanks a lot for asking this question. And now one thing that you do, Paramesh, and I think this is also very important for people who are not entrepreneurs but entrepreneurs. Okay, and this is something that I faced a lot when I was working in Mahindra. When we start a new idea, let's say there is an innovation, and we want to apply that, you always have to satisfy your team management, the top management, because they are the ones who are going to give. And similarly for entrepreneurs, the investors are the ones who are going to pay you, right? Now, in your user segment, what you do is, other than keeping the users also, you need to keep a look at your business perspective. You need to keep the top management or the investor as one of the users. It's very important. Why? Because they are the ones who are actually going to finally give you the check, right? And what are the things that they look for is something that you have to put under value proposition. Now, say somebody says that I am looking for an ROI, which is probably I want a return within the next 2 years. Now you are going to put under the value proposition column that this is something that is a value that I will be providing to this user segment, who is the one who is going to write my check. Important to do. But Remember, once you have taken your business also, is your business guy also within your user segment, automatically you are fulfilling the desirability of that user. So that also comes under user desirability. Now, when you asked Parameshwar that whether that should come under economic viability and not under user desirability, economic viability actually shows you the mathematics based on your technical feasibility. You want to provide somebody, say, a return within the next 2 years, and to do that you start putting that I need to do today this stuff. Okay, now when you put all those stuff here and you start putting down that what is the cost structure now if I want to do it, and you see that not possible, I am not getting the way I was planning. So that blue box at the bottom level where you had the cost structure and the revenue stream, when you had a look at it and you realize no, there is a big problem, these two are not matching, that's what highlight you that there is a problem. That's what is economic viability is all about. Value proposition, when you put, are things that you want to do. Economic viability does not show you what you want to do, it shows you whether it is possible or not, right? So when you still want to do things, that is desire. When you actually see that whether I can do it, that is viability, that is economic viability. Could I answer your question, Parameshwar?
Yes, and then of course, and it is
Okay.
covered most of the things.
Thank you. So any other questions?
Sayantan, am I audible? Pinaki?
Yes, Pinaki.
So first will be the value proposition, and then people will go for economic viability, right? So first, this portions will have to be catered first in the BMC model, the value proposition portion, and then we go to the economic viability and all the other stuff.
Yeah. So if you are filling your business model canvas, always start from the absolute right side, which is your customer segment. First thing, if you remember the video that I showed you, they started off with the customer segment. Okay, they started off with the customer segment. So first you have to define who you are making the business for. What you have a product or service in mind. If sometimes this happens that I already have a product and service in mind, and then I'm coming to business model canvas, can I make it? That was one of the questions also somebody has put in the have asked this. I'll come to it, but for the timing, let me tell you, you always start with your customer segment and find out for whom you are creating the business. Okay, once you are done with that, then go into value proposition and see that what value am I providing to this customer segment. That's the second thing you do. Once you have done that, then you start writing down that how am I going to provide that value proposition. That's what channel is all about. What kind of things I want to do, how do I create a relationship with my customer, that is customer relationship. Then you move to that, if I want to do all this stuff, then what are the different activities I need to do, what are the different resources I need to have, or what are the different partnerships I need to have. That is your technical feasibility part. Once you have done the technical feasibility, you have seen that who all are you going to be your partners, what all the resources you are going to use, then you know how much money you are going to spend, right? Start putting that under the cost structure. Once you have done that, now you start putting that how much am I going to charge, where from am I getting that money from, and you create your revenue stream. So always you start with user desirability, and within user desirability, that too you start with your customer segment and value proposition. Then you make the whole story. Never do anything else other than this. You should always start with this two first. Okay.
Thanks, Sayantan. I think we are focusing on the correct two pillars then today.
Yes. That's the reason why we are doing this too, because this is where you should be able to start the business. Any other question on user segment? If not, then we can.
Sayantan, yeah, hi, it's Ravitesh here. I have
Yes,
one question. So in the case studies, what we have discussed till now, there is a common, you can say, every company which has grown, it has a common way that they started in a narrow segment or a niche segment.
Yes.
And once they got success in one segment, then they started growing into different segments. Maybe it is Google or maybe it is Amazon. They all started with a niche segment. Can I summarize that way?
Absolutely, you are bang on. This is how you actually run your business. When you start, it is always like you penetrate first, you go deep, learn things. That's very important. Doesn't matter who your mentor is, who your godfather is. Nobody can help you in starting a business well other than your own experience of starting it. So you always have to start deep, learn things with one niche segment, as you rightly said, Ravi. And then once you are ready that this is I have learned enough, then you start broadening yourself. That with this knowledge, I will start with 2-3 more segments and become a full-fledged scalable business.
Sayantan?
Yes, Ravi Shankar.
Yeah, so just another question based on on Ravite's point, that right now, if I mean, when it will be right time to go for the next segment, is there any such process or something, or is it just on my hunch I will be moving toward those 2, 3, 4 type of customization based on requirement?
See, honestly speaking, there are different perspectives to it. Okay, some people are very courageous. That's what we see sometimes. You remember commonfloor.com, right? And there was Common Floor, and there was another similar kind of startup. I am not able to remember right now. So what happened is, with Common Floor, there was one issue that they started off expanding too soon, and when they started doing that, they started faltering. So actually, it's a call that you as an entrepreneur take along with your investors, along with the board of directors. At that point of time, it is very difficult to tell you exactly right at this moment that what is the right way to do it. Sometimes people learn things. So it's all about how well you have learned through your experiences. What are the different things you have learned and how you are applying it? If you are half-heartedly learn things and you just, because you have started earning revenues, you have started thinking that I will just expand and become a famous name, that's a problem. But if you have felt that this is good enough, I have done it, right, now move also works. Now, one more thing, Ravi, over here is sometimes it also happens the other way around, that you had been really slow and somebody else learned from you your mistakes and all, and they expand. That also happens. So that's why it's very difficult to tell you where exactly you should immediately start looking for it, because there is always a catch, and it's very gray area where you actually move around to understand that when you should be moving next.
Right. Okay. Thank
Just to add Shayantan's point,
yeah.
Now if you see, Zomato has started delivering groceries. So
true,
that is the need of the hour. Many of the normal business, whatever they had, many of them have started enter into sanitization due to this COVID-19 pandemic. So this is a situation, a special situation. So people are doing that. So yeah, this is a time to shift.
Absolutely. Hang on, Sangeet. This is one important thing that people actually look for opportunities to dive in.
Oh, Sayantan, I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Priyanka.
Yes,
I wanted to know which are all the dimensions that I should look for to acquire knowledge to begin a startup.
Okay. See, Priyanka, is actually there's a lot of things that you actually plan. I would say that first thing that you focus on, is that for whom you are, that's what we are discussing, for whom you want to start a startup. The technicalities of a startup, that will eventually happen, you will learn, and there are multiple resources available all around. You can look into a lot of data that is available for new age entrepreneurs. So all these things will come, but first thing that you need to do is finalize that I strongly care for this segment. You have to have that inner calling. Once you have that this is something that I want to go ahead with, and this is the segment I want to serve, and then you realize that this problem of this segment is what I want to solve. Once you do that, then the other parts will start falling in. I'll come to that later on, because we are just discussing on these two aspects today. I'll just keep it here, but definitely we can have it offline also. We can discuss how you can proceed on this. Okay.
Hi, Shantanu.
Yeah, Ankur, you have a question?
Yeah. Shantanu, yes, I just wanted to know, like, how will you define user and customer for your service that you are providing right here, right now?
Consultancy?
Whatever you are doing, like entrepreneurship, and you have
Okay. Got
in
you.
the beginning only you have, yeah. So we will be able to understand more. Like, how will you decide? Okay, right now we are a user of your platform, as we are attending your webinar and all these things. So what is the difference? How will you distinguish?
Okay, excellent, Ankur. That's a live example that Ankur is asking for. Brilliant. So actually, I did that before I left my organization. So while I was with Mahindra's, I was doing, and for many of you who, of course, definitely you may not know, Ankur is one of my mentees. So and in Mahindra only I mentored him. So while I was mentoring these people, I started realizing that new engineers who join Mahindra, mostly in the age group of say 20, 21, they are the ones who have a lot of energy in them to start something new, to do something great about and bring in change. And that's where I started focusing on while I was working in Mahindra. But then it was only the few engineers who are joining this Mahindra as a whole. So that's why you see that 550 over a period of so many years I could train. Now that's when I decided that I need to search more, that whether there is a segment that is existing where people are looking to start up or people are looking to grow in their own organization. And what I found is that yes, there are many people. So how did I found that? So I kept on talking into different forums, and I talked to a lot of people over say different social media and all, that what actually their career aspirations are. And you wouldn't believe, most of the people in the age group of 16 to 26 is where I heard them that yes, I am into an organization right now, or I am planning to get into an organization in the next couple of years. But going ahead, I believe that I want to start something of my own. And that's what I realized, that this is a big opportunity because I have the knowledge to provide, and there is somebody who is ready to take it. If I just need to leave my job and then I can cater to this segment, somebody who wants to fly, why don't I support them? And that's where I decided that I will start, and I started defining that which age group are these people. As I said, 16 to 26, 27. I made that, okay, 16 to 27 is my customer segment. Okay, then what are they looking for? And then I found that these are people who are aspiring to do things differently in their career. Then I started looking for this kind of people. LinkedIn gives you a good option. I post something and I see who is coming and who is commenting on these things. When I find somebody, I go and talk to those people. Even I am part of another community where there is a lot of people. There is more than some 10,000 people discussing things every day. I just look for people who are saying that I want to start a venture, or I am doing this, I am an engineer, I am doing this. I just go and talk to them because I know that I can help them. And again, remember one thing, as I said before, if you are not planning to provide value, don't expect that you are going to earn any money. So my philosophy is, I will definitely provide value to people, and in return, obviously, I'll also earn, and I'll see people growing. Anyways, I was earning money in Mahindra, so that was not a problem. So anyways, this is how I did. And Ankur, I guess I could answer a little bit of what you asked.
Sometimes there's one more question from...
Yeah, somebody else wanted to say something. We actually have value proposition left, guys. So
this is Parmesh again. One more question.
Yes, Parmesh.
I just wanted to know, did you apply any trees tools to say something to your segment, and is that useful, or is that any contradiction between your
actually,
when their understanding?
When you actually learn trees and you start doing it just like design thinking and all, I have realized that trees is very powerful. You can apply anywhere. Honestly speaking, I didn't use trees yet, but given that you asked me this question, probably I may try to do something sometime later on, but not obviously right now. I have applied trees on a real life problem where I was supposed to come up with a hackathon for people who were in different parts of the country, and that hackathon has to happen online. And I applied trees and I saw brilliant results. So I can share it. No, not trees. TREES. No, not that. TRIZ. Actually, in my introduction, I put it. I am a trees level 2 practitioner. TRIZ is an acronym for. It's a kind of a methodology. It's a Russian acronym, and it's a way of inventive problem solving. Okay.
Yeah,
so
I'm also a practitioner of it, and
awesome.
So I was into medical devices and came to IT now. So probably
excellent. I think a lot of things we can discuss later on in common.
Yeah.
So this is something that we can take offline as well. Now we are seriously short in time, so I'll just jump into the rest of the part. Okay, and okay, so value proposition. So similarly, as I said about defining the user segment, this is also important to understand why do you want to define your value proposition. And let me ask you first this question, and again, I will require your help. Why do you think people used to buy this product? You can see this is a Kodak analog, I mean, not a digital camera, right? The chemical films. Why people used to buy this product? One or two people just can unmute yourself and just tell me.
To capture movement.
Okay. Can you just tell me whether this is something that they say? You can take a picture, because at that time this is important. You can take a picture. You can print that picture.
So
yeah.
So as the time goes, like it's a Kodak, so they want to capture share the moment. That's the tagline was Kodak moment.
Your voice is breaking a lot. Fine. I mean, I got your points. So these are a few things that at that time Kodak felt that this is why people buy their product, because they can take a picture, they can print the picture, they can print the picture in high definition, and it is battery operated. So these are the few things, and there obviously you can carry a multiple films. In a film, probably 34 pictures you could take. So you can carry multiple films. This is what Kodak believed that their users are buying their product for. Now, what goes wrong if you don't know why you are making a product? Now, this is what product believed that people are doing it, but essentially were people doing it actually? Were people using this product only because of the 5 pointers that they have put? Obviously no. So that was not the value proposition that they were providing. They felt that this is what they are providing, but essentially this was not the case. When did this thing come out? When this guy, Steven Sassoon, he created the first digital camera within Kodak. And he went ahead and showed this prototype to the top management. Like right now I was answering to this question, that you need to have your top management as a user segment also, right? And the questions that he encountered were not that, wow, this is great, or how did you make it, or what is this the next big thing? But what they asked is, how will people print the photos? And why will people look at some photos on a projected screen? These are the few questions that Steven Sassoon later on told media that this is what I was asked when I showed them this. Steven Sassoon was an intern at Kodak who was given the work that, can you see if digitally we can have pictures? The quality of picture that was coming out from this digital camera was something around 0.01 megapixel. At that time, Kodak was giving almost some 4 or 5 megapixel. For them, that was, wow, what is this? This is nothing close to what we are giving. And you are saying that this is going to be the next big thing. Why will people want this? They can't print it, right? Now, this is what is everything that went wrong with Kodak. Later on, what happened is beyond 2004-5, this is how the analog photos dropped. The number of analog photos been taken, but photos kept on growing, and we saw Kodak fading in the same year when Instagram was bought by Facebook, right? Now, why suddenly we are talking about Instagram? Kodak is something who was selling these cameras, these films and all, right? We are talking about Instagram because Kodak realized at a very later stage that what they actually started off doing was creating the Kodak moment. And the Kodak moment was not printing photos or carrying multiple films with them. It was the Kodak moment is something that you don't want to miss. You want to capture that and share with people. That's the reason why approximately in 2000, a little early 2000, Kodak bought a company called Ophoto. But it was something similar to Instagram. But what mistake they did is they still continued asking people to print photos from Ophoto. Nothing went forward to them because they were not sure why their user segment actually is buying stuff, why they are actually buying a camera for. And 2012, they were bankrupt. But this guy, when he started, this is George Eastman, the guy who started Kodak. And when he started, he had a different view in his mind. He actually experienced the problem that if he needs to capture something that he wants to treasure, he need to carry a lot of equipments with him. That made him go ahead and learn a lot of chemical technology, which eventually got the first camera that you are seeing over there. That's the one that Kodak made initially. But when he passed away and other people started running Kodak, they just forgot why they are selling what they are selling. So it's very important to realize that how you define value or what is the value that you are providing is all about. So how do you define it? What is value? Value is nothing but the job your user wants to get done. And when I talk about this, I cannot miss but to show you a video of this guy. This is Professor Clayton Christensen. If you don't know him, take it down and just make sure that you know a little about him. He is the guy who coined the term disruption that we all talk about. He is an innovation guru. This year, this great innovator passed away. But this is one video that I want to show you of Professor Clayton Christensen, where he's talking about how for one company who was making milkshakes, how he redefined what kind of milkshakes they will be making. Now, why is it important to listen to this? Because most of the time, as Ravi just said right now, that he wants to sell a few products on Amazon and he knows the customer is set, everything is done. So what else can I do? Now, this guy talks about that why is it irrelevant to look into the other people who are selling probably the same thing as yours and try to find out some little space where you can push in and get into. Let's listen to him.
So let me start with a silly example of milkshakes. One of the big fast food restaurant companies was trying to goose up the sales of its milkshake product line. They segmented their markets first by product category. You had the main meals over here, and then they had the desserts over here that were categorized by product. They could tell you exactly how many milkshakes were sold by McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, and so on. Then they also segmented their markets by demographics. So they could give you a demographic profile of the people that were most likely to buy it. They even had psychographic profiles of these people. So they would invite people who fit those profiles into conference rooms and say, could you tell us what we could do to our milkshake that would cause you to buy more of them? Do you want it chocolatey or creamy or chunky or chewy or cheaper? And they get very good feedback. They would then improve the product, and it never had any impact on sales or profitability whatsoever. So one of our colleagues went in and just stood in one of their restaurants for 18 hours with the question on his mind, gosh, I wonder what job people hire a milkshake to do for them. So he took very careful data on when did they buy it, what were they wearing, were they alone or with a group of people, did they buy a meal with the milkshake or just the milkshake, did they eat it in the restaurant, did they leave? It turned out that nearly half the milkshakes were sold in the very early morning. It was the only thing they bought, they were always alone, and they always got in the car and drove off with them. So the next morning he comes back and he confronts these people as they're leaving the restaurant with the milkshake in hand. And he asks them, excuse me, please, but could you tell me what job you were trying to get done for yourself when you came here to hire this milkshake? As they would struggle to answer, he'd say, well, think about when you're in the same situation, needing to get the same thing done, but you didn't come here to hire a milkshake. what did you hire? And it turned out that they all had a similar job. That was, they had a very long, very boring commute to work. They just needed something to do while they were driving. One hand had to be on the wheel, but God had given them this extra cup holder. And they just needed to keep busy. They weren't hungry yet, but they knew they'd be hungry by 10 o'clock. So they wanted something that would just thump down in their stomach and stay for a while. So what do I hire when I got this job to do? Well, come to think of it, I hired a banana last Friday, but it didn't do the job well at all. It was gone in 2 minutes. I was hungry by 7:30. Yeah, I guess I hired donuts on occasion, but they get my fingers sticky against the steering wheel gooey. And I hire bagels, but they're dry, tasteless, crumb all over my clothes. If I put cream cheese or jam on them, then I got to steer with my knees. And then if the phone rings, that's a problem. And I remember once I hired a Snickers bar, but it made me feel so guilty I never hired one again. But let me tell you, when I hire one of these milkshakes, it is so viscous that it easily takes me 20 minutes to suck it up that thin little straw. I have no idea what the components of it are, the ingredients, but I do know I'm still full at 10 o'clock, and it fits right in that cup holder. And it turns out that the milkshake does the job better than any of the competitors. The competitors are not Burger King milkshakes, but bananas, donuts, bagels, Snickers bars. And very importantly, the milkshake is competing against boredom because it's so inconvenient to find your way to that restaurant and then you got to wait in the drive-through lane or the line inside to get it, that a lot of times they just drive to work bored out of their tree.
So I guess this gave you an idea that essentially when you are making a product, what you believe you are making the product for, what you believe that your customer buys it for, is not actually why they are buying it for. These guys believe that they are competing with the other Burger Kings and all other people who sell milkshakes. But the people who are coming to buy the milkshake had nothing in mind that they want the milkshake. They were buying it because they wanted to stay full till the long drive that they have. And now, in this video, it is not spoken about, but actually, Clayton Christensen also talks about that what suggestions he gave to improve this quality or improves the sale of the milkshake. He said that just add a few kind of crunchy stuff into it, not because that will make things more healthy or something, but it's just that when this guy is so bored, you hear him saying that this milkshake is actually competing against boredom, right? So when this guy is bored driving all the way, and he just sucks in a little bit of milkshake, when this crunchy chip goes into, suddenly he feels like he's alive, right? So that's how you design your product, guys. You don't look into another competitor who is making a similar product and just look into what are the problems and let me make it one. This is another way to look at it. You look at the people who are using that product, try to understand that why are they using that product, and then you can design your own product. Now, this is obviously not the answer to what Ravi asked. I will again come to that also. But this is what Job Done is all about. It is about the benefit that you provide to your customer. But where mostly people go wrong, entrepreneurs go wrong. Now, for example, right now, just imagine, okay, today, just imagine that you have never knew Bluetooth technology before. You have never heard of it before. Okay, so it's a new technology to you, but internet and all was are there, very much there. Say you as an entrepreneur have come up with a new device which has Bluetooth technology. You have incorporated it, and you come and say that to your user or customer that this device has a Bluetooth technology. Do you want to buy it? What is the expected reaction? I think mostly we will say that they will say, what is this Bluetooth technology about? Is it blue in color? The tooth is blue or something? You don't know. Nobody knows about it. So they don't care and they never say yes to this. But then you go ahead and say that, you know what? You can actually transfer files from one device to the other and within a range of X meters. He won't tell you, but he will think, okay, so there is a range issue. There's a constraint this guy is talking about. Within a range only, I'll get to transfer things. I don't know why he's selling this product. But then you say this, that you know what? There's a scenario where you need to leave for a meeting and you need to transfer a file to your colleague and for some reason the internet is down. And here this technology will help you to transfer, and this device actually will help you to transfer the file from your device to the other. And that's where you are talking, man. That's where you are talking to your user, because the first one what you said is nothing but a feature and nobody cares for a feature. The next one that you said is an advantage of that feature. Still people don't care about it. What people care about is the benefit that your product gives. And this is not something that I am telling you. This is something that this guy had spoken about. People buy the benefit of your product. They don't care about the product. Okay, so this is what my advice to all early stage startups will be. Don't go ahead and start a lucrative business model just because others are doing good in that. Try to understand what is the pain point and understand what job your user wants to get done. Create a product or service around it and then deliver it. That's it. You remember always the 3 blocks we spoke about: user desirability, business viability, and technical feasibility. And the sweet spot in between is what we are talking about every time: value. Provide value, then you can get a good business running. Okay. Again, you can take a screenshot of this, or I will also share this with you, this slide with you. So these are few 10 questions that are very, very important for you when you are putting down your value proposition, that what all things you need to know about your customer. Then you can easily create a solution out of it. So few of the things that you asked for. Achha, before I go into that, I'll stop here and I will ask for questions. If you have some questions, please let me know on value proposition now. Any questions on value proposition?
Hi, Sayantan. This is Ratish here.
Yes, Ratish.
Are there any objective metrics for value proposition?
There is any objective?
Objective metrics or objective indices?
See, if you look into the template that I shared, this is kind of, I won't say it's objective to the way that you can put some numbers to it. Sorry, I am not sharing. Sorry. Let me share and show you. Yeah, this is if you're looking into this you cannot actually put some numbers to it next to it, but definitely these are questions. If you have answered that, you know that you can aram se create your value proposition. So at least answers to, but when you look at this question, some of the questions may seem very similar. Remember, they are very different from each other. Every question has a significance of its own. So don't write the same answer against multiple similar sounding questions. Try to look at the question, understand, take some time and understand that what it means. Once you're done with this, you will be pretty much sure that yes, this is where I know everything about my user segment and I can go ahead and come up with a business idea. So to answer your question, not a clear-cut numerical matrix, but yes, this you can consider as a template.
Got it, Sayantan. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
Sayantan?
Go ahead, Ravi.
Yeah, Abhishek?
Yeah. So actually, I have a question with respect to value proposition with respect to a healthcare setting, healthcare background. So generally, what happens is, I mean, the user research and all is generally more difficult as compared to other fields, is what I've seen. So I mean, how do you go about defining value proposition in those kind of settings? Because most problems may, especially in case of India, the user data and the trends are generally not clear, especially in healthcare settings. So how do you go about proposing value, in these kind of segments?
So Abhishek, I'll just ask you one more stuff. So can you just define one user segment under this industry that you are talking about? Just give me one user segment, some persona that this is for whom I am talking about value proposition.
Yes, definitely. So, for example, now we are facing this COVID crisis, correct?
Okay.
So, in the case of disinfection sector, for example, so we know for a fact that sanitizing our hands is good and it kills germs and etc. etc. But will doctors accept some kind of a product which will disinfect something? Question mark. If I am working something in that domain, let's say, so This is actually related a personal example. So I found that user data and the definition, so the numbers specifically, those are very vague and not directly available. So how do you go ahead in those cases with the value proposition?
So if I understood you correctly, your user segment are doctors, right?
Yeah, yes,
Doctors.
correct.
And you are thinking of coming up with a sanitization proposal for the doctors.
Yes, for example.
Okay, fine. So where are you struggling? You are struggling that the data that you have, the secondary research data that you have, is not something that you can believe on, right?
Yes, exactly. Even though I know for a fact that it is a problem, but I still can't, justify it with numbers or,
Okay.
prove it for that matter of fact.
Okay, Abhishek, let me ask you one question. What stops you from talking to a few of these doctors?
Nothing does, technically speaking, but the problem it seems is more, more behavioral and more deeper rather than just, plain. So, doctors might not, actually admit to that problem particularly. Is what I'm
Okay.
trying to say.
Okay, fine. So so let's look at it this way. Probably you are believing there are certain things that you have in mind, which, if you remember, Avishai, I think you remember about the confirmation bias we spoke of in another session, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
So initially you may have a few biases probably that you note down, that these are the things that I believe are things that may be happening with a doctor, a behavioral stuff. First, note all these things down. Okay. Because at this time you are not sure whether it's a bias that you have or it truly exists. Okay. Now what you do is two things. If you remember how you cope with a confirmation bias, number one, people who interact most with these doctors, you first check with them, but they are not doctors themselves. Okay. You check with them, talk to them to understand whether doctors really have that. That's one thing that you can do first. Next thing that you can do is you create situations. You interact with a doctor, you create a situation where you get this doctor to demonstrate that behavioral trait that you believe that doctor does. Okay. You plan out how you can design a situation where this doctor will go ahead and do it. If you see it happening, you know that, okay, probably I was right. But if you don't see it happening, you just note it down. Maybe for this case it didn't work out, let me confirm this once more. Fine. So that's how you do. And let me tell you one more thing, Abhishek. Mostly when you are going ahead to design a complete business model, don't rely on secondary research only. It's very important that you do a primary research most of the time. Right now, I know that there is this COVID-19 situation. You cannot go ahead and meet people, but as much as possible, try to do some kind of video sessions, some kind of stuff when you are actually planning. And you need to get users to come on stage. So you need to create some kind of value proposition for them to come there. All this stuff will be there. But important thing is, don't rely on secondary research and go ahead and start a business.
Okay, Sanjay. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Hi,
thanks. Yes, Ankur.
Yeah, I have a question. Like you have in the beginning, you have told us that user and customer is different. They may be different. They may not be the same thing. But when we come to the value proposition thing, so like if the user and customer are different, suppose that I am creating a product for a child, but child is my user and customer is the parent. Maybe that thing is very well suited and my value proposition is there, very good. What I think is good, service is good, everything is good. But ultimately, customer is the utmost thing now, who will buy my services and all. So how will we take these things like where the user and customer are different? They are not the same.
Absolutely. Brilliant question, Ankur. And this is something that I wanted to keep as a question at the end. This is something that I wanted to ask you guys that, okay, now that we have spoken on all this, do you want to make any change to the business model canvas, any naming? From customer segment, I named it as user segment. Now, what I was looking from you, and this already happened with Ankur saying this, let's look at it as the stakeholder segment. you have to now already we were discussing on how you include your business management into this, right? Under user segment, they are neither user, neither customer, they are a stakeholder. Similarly, if you remember, we talking about the multi-sided platforms. Everybody in a platform, they are stakeholders. They are not necessarily users or customers. Same answer goes to you, Ankur, that you have to consider every stakeholder of your business model under the user segment or customer segment, or you call it the stakeholder segment. Under that, you put everybody over there, and for each stakeholder you have to identify the value proposition. So if you are making something for a child, remember that you should not miss your customer over there, and you definitely design something for him. Otherwise, he or she is not shelling out any money for you to buy the product. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'll keep this.
Okay, great.
I think we have already at 7:30. I think we have two questions to answer which are pending. One is from Avisha Pandya.
Yes.
Who asked that whether emotions can be considered in the value proposition, and if it is considered, then you will consider the resultant action of that, or you will consider the emotion, how it fits in the value proposition thing.
The change of it. You will consider, Avisha, you will be considering the change of it. So right now, if your customer has fear, I think I am still looking at it. See, the last thing, what risk do your users fear, right? Very important to understand. If your user is having some kind of fear, how you help to overcome that. If you help to overcome that, that comes under your value proposition, that I will ensure that my user segment, this, overcomes fear using my product or service, or I am able to minimize the risk associated in my product or service for my user. So this is going to be your value proposition then. Definitely emotion comes. Yeah. Yes, Avisha.
Yeah, but the thing is that when we go to the investors, they don't consider this as a valid point when we put forward the value proposition.
Agreed. They won't. They won't. I agree to you. But point is, when you go to the investor, you consider him as one of the stakeholders. What he's looking for? He's looking for money, right? What you need to do is you need to show that, see, today there are A, B, C alternatives to this kind of who are providing this solution. And customers are worried for this. Now, I am somebody else who has come today, and I am just seeing that there is an emotional issue with people using the ABC alternatives. When I come as a D alternative, I am the one who is going to stay, and ABC either will get acquired by me or will have to close their business. That's something you talk in investors' language. See, the same thing doesn't work with multiple people, right? Investor understands one language, your user understands another language, your customer understands another language. So your language has to be different. But the value that you are providing, the essence that you are coming out of your business has to be the same. It has to be there.
Yeah, but for example, as like I have already discussed this with you, what if like the whole point of that product is the emotion that is getting generated? How do you...
I know. So I'll say that we can discuss a little on that once we have the full chart ready. We'll have a look at it, where the problem lies, and then we'll discuss further on that. Yours is a very critical case, I know, Avisha.
Yeah. Thanks.
No worries.
I think one more question was there from Awais Sheikh, who...
Yes, Awais. Yeah.
You can see that question. I think related to medical professionals, when they can start a venture, and because their academic career is very long, for 10 years approx for a medical professional.
True. I agree. So basically, you know what? This is something that I wanted to tell you, that I am coming up with an online course for you budding entrepreneurs to start up. So this will be launched probably in another couple of weeks or so. So that may answer a few questions. Having said that, you just do one thing. You can talk separately, ping me, talk to me. This is my details, and I can take further on this, that how you can actually take your business up. See, Avesh, doesn't matter whether you are a physician or you are somebody else. for everybody, it's the one thing that you always start off with is the segment that you want to cater to. I think Dr. Ismail is here. I don't know whether he's still here, but I could see sometimes he pinged. So Dr. Ismail Shahid is he's from Bangladesh, and he has started his own venture, a very successful venture that yes, Dr. Ismail, can you please unmute yourself? It will be a very good to interact with you. Yes, Dr. Ismail.
Great, Nathan. How you doing? How's it going?
Great. There are a lot of doctors over here, Dr. Ismail, and they have a lot of doubts about how a physician can be an entrepreneur. Right. I will tell you guys that Dr. Ismail, I think I have shared also his ebooks on how to become a physician entrepreneur, and he is somebody you can actually look up as a great example of how you can be a doctor and an entrepreneur at the same time. Also, I understand that people who are from Startup in Crisis, you guys have also interacted with Dr. Anirudh Malpani today. Today or yesterday, I don't know exactly when it happened, but you also have seen how an IVF expert also is an entrepreneur. So you have so many examples. You have Dr. Ismail here, you have Anirudh Malpani there, and so many people are there already who have been doctors and they have been entrepreneurs. So I believe that the course that I am making will definitely help, but I will request you, I think Pinaki has already shared you the feedback link. If you can put there the things that you want to learn more about starting up a business and all, it will help me to curate just the things that is important for you to look at. And this will be a brilliant learning, and we'll go ahead and doing it. So I think I have already taken 6 minutes more than what I asked you for. So over to you, Pinaki.
I think this was a very, very good, overwhelming, and very, very interactive and participative discussions, which I can tell. And please give your feedback. So we will definitely ask Shantanu to work on your feedbacks and definitely create more content which will be relevant for industry specific or specific to some businesses which you are really going up. And I will tell you that all the best wishes to all of you, because being here and hearing to BMC means definitely you are going, and in somewhere in the mind you are looking for an entrepreneurship venture. If you're still not in it, definitely you're looking for it. That is why you are here. So I will tell you that please keep up the spirit. Please work on your individual BMC canvases. Whenever you feel a difficulty, ping Shantanu. Shantanu's details he has already shared. Ping him. And make his life miserable. That will make him more happy, I think, end of the day. Shantanu.
Thank you. Thanks a lot to all of you. Have a very, very nice evening. And I hope that your 90 minutes of Sunday evening was worth it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Shantanu. Thanks for the session.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, please give your feedbacks, guys. Yeah.
Surely we'll do that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shantanu. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Shantanu.
Yeah. Bye.